Welcome to the Bywords Show. I'm your host, Hannah Hughes. Bywords is all about equipping women for purposeful living by starting conversations, celebrating stories, and inspiring faith. In a world that applauds the hustle, I'm here to help you break free from the lies and come back to what really matters. It's time to get real, get rooted in truth, and come alive in relationship with Jesus so you can show up to each day with intention and confidence no matter where you're at in your story. Here we believe that embracing our stories brings hope, healing, and purpose to the process, and sharing our stories helps others do the same. Whether you're looking for a midweek faith refresh, practical tools for pursuing your dreams, or just need some good old-fashioned girl talk, you're in the right place. Grab your latte and let's dive in. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Bywords Show. I'm so glad you're here. Today is the day. And I am really excited to introduce you guys to Brittany Poppe, literally coolest, cutest last name ever. I love it so much. And we're going to get into her story today. But before we do, Brittany, I have to ask you our icebreaker question, which is what has been filling your cup lately, both literally and figuratively?
Ooh, I love that question. Literally in the mornings, I'm really enjoying making raw milk lattes. So I just brew some coffee, put in my raw milk, and just blend it together. It tastes so good. So that's literally, and then
That sounds
figuratively,
amazing.
really just like getting into the word in the mornings. For a while there, I was kind of not prioritizing my quiet time, and just really getting to enjoy my quiet time outside in the fresh air has been just such a cup filler right now.
Oh my gosh, there's nothing like that, right? Like we just moved from Texas to Colorado, and I feel like summer, we couldn't have chosen a better time to move because summer is usually like the most dreaded time of year for me. And the fact that we now can be outside and enjoying the weather, that's dreamy. I love that. Those are great answers. So we are going to talk about some heavy stuff today, just so you guys know. We're going to talk about abortion, and we're going to talk about Brittany's story and just the incredible redemption and the testimony she now has. And I know you've been on a long journey, Brittany. So would you just take us back to the beginning and share a little bit about your story and how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's kind of, some people, when I start to tell my story, I kind of go back to my growing up years. And the reason why I do that is because I think it's important to really kind of get rid of that stigma of women who choose abortion, because literally we know that there is no stigma. There's no picture in your mind that is going to fit every single woman who has made this decision. So,
Right.
growing up, I grew up in a loving Christian home. I had two parents that really firmly believed in Christian values, and they raised my brother and I to love Jesus. And they really impressed upon us the value of human life from a really young age, even. And they did that in a loving way. We were never those angry people when that topic came up. It was just more so, how can we love others and value the life that God has created? And so I had that foundation growing up, and I firmly believed in those principles. My dad was a Vietnam veteran, and he was diagnosed with some terminal illnesses when I was 6. And he fought those for about 10 years, and then he passed away when I was 15. And so I like to kind of describe that because I think it's so true that in that tragedy, we know that the enemy is constantly on the prowl, doing whatever he can to steal, kill, and destroy. And I believe that he used that tragedy in my family as an opportunity to come through an open door. And I opened that door without any hesitation. And I found myself in a relationship with a boy that my mom had kind of forbidden me from seeing. She had given him a fair chance, but he was just not somebody that she thought was good for me, especially at a time when we were going through such intense grief as a family. And instead of doing what I would have done, growing up, I knew that I was to honor my parents, and I knew I was supposed to honor her. I didn't do that. I decided to live a double life. And so at home, I was the person that my mom had raised me to be, or I pretended to be the person that my mom had raised me to be. And then when I wasn't at home, I was in this secret relationship. I even went so far as to get a secret cell phone so that I
Mm.
could talk freely without having to worry that she was going to, go through my text messages with my friends and figure out what I was doing. And after this had been going on for about a year, I ended up finding out that I was pregnant. So I was 17 years old at this time, a senior in high school. And the moment that I saw that positive pregnancy test, my life as I knew it was over, because I
Mm.
knew that I could no longer live this double life in secret. That was until I Googled, can you have an abortion under the age of 18? And I came across this information about a law. This law is called the judicial bypass. And it's a law that any state in our nation currently, most states, I think there's only one that doesn't have this, that has parental notification laws for minors to have an abortion. They have this law called the judicial bypass that kind of is a loophole for that.
Hmm.
So it negates the need for any parental notification or consent. And I live in North Dakota. And so we do have parental notification laws, but we also had that judicial bypass law. And so once I knew that abortion was an option for me, I believed that that was going to, quote unquote, fix my problem. And so I just kind of had this like tunnel vision of, I can do this and my life will just go back to normal. Nobody has to find out. I don't have to disappoint my mom and have her know what I've been doing, and I can just continue to live this double life that I've been living. And so that's what I did.
Man, I can't even imagine like being 17 and having to make that decision on your own, already grieving a loss. And then at such a young age, trying to figure out like, what is my place in the world? What do I do? That must have been a lot to process.
Yes. There's much I remember from that time, but there's also much I don't remember. And I think it's because of what you just said. There was so much to process. I think my brain is just kind of like, yeah, overwhelmed.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure. I can't even imagine. And then, of course, I love that at the beginning you pointed out like there's no stigma. There's not one person that abortion affects, like it's not
Mhm.
one person. There are people from every single walk of life who consider it, who have abortions, who, like have faced these challenges and have to navigate through this. And then so many people going through it alone. So for you, you said you were living this double life. So did your mom ever find out what was going on, or did the boyfriend ever find out that was going on, or did you go through it on your own for a while? What was that like?
Yeah, so when I found out I was pregnant, I did tell my boyfriend, and he was supportive of keeping the baby. He said, "Hey, it's okay, we can do this." And all I could think about was my own self-preservation, and I said, "No, we can't do this." And I think about that now and just I feel for him. I don't have contact with him currently, and haven't for quite a long time. But that was somebody who had no choice in the matter, and he didn't really know what to do with that except support me in what I had decided to do. So while he wasn't supportive of me doing it, he did help me, find out how we were going to pay for the procedure. And he did go with me to the clinic on the day of my appointment. And then I continued that relationship for about a little over a year afterwards. So we did stay together for a while, but things were not the same. And
Mm.
it was a lot. I think his perception of who I was completely changed, and things were pretty toxic for a while until I eventually ended the relationship. And I don't think he was at all disappointed that I had ended the
Mm.
relationship at that point. My mom did find out about my relationship a couple of months after the abortion.
Mm,
She had My cousin actually had found my secret cell phone and
mm,
went to my mom and told her, what was going on. Not about My cousin didn't know about the abortion, but she had known that I was sneaking around. And became a runaway risk. So my mom took me to a home for at risk teens, and I had to stay there for a week. And she and I kind of went through some counseling together.
mm,
And that is when I broke down and ended up telling her about the abortion. And I told
mm,
her when I left the clinic, I was given this paper bag full of, I think, like medications, literature, things like that. And the clinic in which I went to is in the town that I was living in at the time. And I knew my mom knew what the name of that clinic was, and it had the logo on that paper bag. And
mm.
so, for whatever reason, I held on to that bag. I had no other connection to my child. And so I think subconsciously I felt like that was all I had. And so when her and I had been kind of just arguing, that's maybe a little bit of a strong word, but we were kind of, just talking about some hard stuff that we had been going through that week. I kind of broke down and I took that paper bag out of the drawer of my nightstand and I handed it to her. And I remember just the look on her face was so confused. And she said, "You're pregnant?" And I just remember saying, "Not anymore." And the look of utter devastation on her face is something that it's really hard for me to even still think about to this day. And it's been 13 or 14 years. And she never once met me with anger in that moment, or a sense. It was just utter devastation at the loss of her grandchild, but also at the fact that she thought that being my parent, she would have every right to help me in a situation like that. And that was taken away from her. And she had no idea that I had been going
Yeah.
through that.
How was that for you? Like hearing afterwards, like she wishes she would have known, or I mean, even after, I mean, that whole experience, I'm sure, was just overwhelming in every way. Just, going to the clinic and then having the procedure done and then life afterwards. I mean, what was that like as you were processing what had happened and then like grieving and healing through that?
Yeah, so I would say immediately when I left the clinic, I felt a mix of relief and guilt because
Mm,
I was just trying to tell myself, okay, it's over. I don't have to think about this again. But I also felt a lot of guilt because I had an encounter with one of the sidewalk advocates outside after I left. And it wasn't a negative encounter. They were all just standing there. And when they saw me leave, just very sorrowful because they had known why I was leaving.
mm,
And I made eye contact with the priest that was standing out there. And he just looked at me with this overwhelming sadness and compassion. And he said nothing to me. And he just knelt down and just began praying. And
mm,
when I would think about that, I would just feel so guilty. That image, even to this day, is still so clear in my mind of just like making eye contact with him and then him praying. Now, being on the other side of healing, that brings me comfort. I've
mm.
actually, not direct contact, but I actually know somebody who knows the priest that was out there that day and
Wow.
has told me how comforting it is to him that he had such an impact on me that day. Yeah, it was just a lot of guilt and trying to bury that. In the years afterwards, I became very angry and I didn't know why. A couple of years after my abortion, I did go actually seek therapy for anger. I would just fly off the handle for the smallest things. Road rage was something I really struggled with. And I never connected it to the unresolved shame and guilt that I hadn't dealt with.
Yeah,
But
wow.
looking back now, I can see when you don't deal with those things, how heavily they weigh on you and really truly kind of change your mental health and how you respond to things. And so I struggled for years with just a short temper, lack of patience, and lots of low self esteem and low self worth.
Gosh, that's crazy thinking about how it just affects you so much in ways that you don't anticipate or maybe wouldn't have even connected the dots until later on. I'm curious because you grew up in a Christian home and your mom and you guys having that conversation afterwards, like how did your faith evolve through that journey?
Yeah, so I think at any point in my life, if you would have asked me if I was a Christian, I would have said, "Oh yeah, yeah, I'm a Christian." But in those years afterwards, I was not living it at all. I think I felt unworthy of following God or having a relationship with him. So while I, still believed that Jesus had died for my sins, I didn't really want a relationship or try to have a relationship with him. Which breaks my heart to think about that I went so long being so lost. And I went off to college and I would, get invited to go to campus crusade meetings and just be like, oh, no, I'm not going to go to that. Or get invited to go to church. And I'm like, oh, no, I'm too much of a fraud to be a part of that.
Mm,
I shouldn't go to that. But I ended up being gifted the book called The Circle Maker.
mm.
That was around my mid 20s, and I don't know if you've read that book, but it's
Yeah, so
super
good.
good. Yeah. And it totally transformed my prayer life. And so I craved this relationship with God. And I started to, pray and pray circles for, at the time I had just graduated. So I was praying for, where God would lead me for a job and just all of the things. And I felt my relationship with him starting to kind of grow, but I always felt like there was this stopping point, like this.
Mm,
I like to describe it as kind of like a brick wall that I had built between God and I, because I had this distorted view of how we get our salvation. I
mm,
thought because what I had done was so bad that I had to do X number of good things or service type things to be able to win his love back. And so while I was growing in relationship with him, it still was not what it could be because I just couldn't see through that wall that I had built.
yeah, I mean, I feel like regardless of circumstance, so many women face that challenge. It's
Mhm.
like we just get this idea in our head that we've got to perform, we've got to earn respect,
Mhm.
love, we've got to earn good things. I mean, I struggle with that. And that's a hard thing to overcome when you're really getting to that place of like rewiring your understanding of who God is and how he loves us unconditionally. That's a really tough one for women who have just come from a background of feeling like, okay, I've got to do the right things. I've got to be a good Christian. I've got to be perfect. I've got to put on a happy face and check all the boxes. And it really does end up being a block, like this whole obstacle in our relationship with him. So how did you start to break through that?
God, I think, gives us these breadcrumbs or these nudges, right? When he's starting to call us to something or when he's starting to kind of reveal our purpose. And, obviously, it's never too late in life to find your purpose. So some of us, find it from a young age. Some of us don't find it until we're much older. But regardless, he gives us those nudges. And looking back, I can see where he had been doing that pretty much from the moment I walked out of that clinic until I finally realized what he was doing.
Wow.
But when I started to kind of actually notice what he was doing, I think my daughter was a little over a year old. She was like a year and a half, and I had been taking up running. I had never been a runner. Uh, and I had just been really working on my health, and I was running outside one day, and I loved listening to Christian music when I would run. I remember this particular morning, I was listening to my Christian playlist, and for some reason, I had it on. Like Spotify has like you can enhance your playlist and they add songs to it, and this song by Casting Crowns came on, and it's called One Step Away. And the opening lyrics, I won't sing it because nobody wants that, but the opening lyrics go something like, what if you could go back and relive one day of your life all over again and unmake the mistake that left you a million miles away from the you once knew? I'm getting chills even just talking about it.
Mm.
I heard the opening of that song and I just immediately lost it. I had to stop running. I was crying. I just felt like I had an actual encounter with God right there outside, telling me that I was not too far gone.
Mm.
Because I had had a lot of guilt after I had my daughter. I would look at her and think, why was I blessed enough to receive this beautiful gift when I do not deserve it? And so I really struggled, and I had told myself that I would have no more children. And 2 weeks roughly after this happened, I found out that I was pregnant again with my son. And
Wow.
I believe that God met me there because he knew the emotion that I was about to face finding out that I was having another baby. Because I love my son so much, but I was so scared when I found out I was pregnant with him because I didn't feel like I deserved him. It was really emotional, and I kind of just went into this deep depression, just wondering why God was giving me good things when I didn't feel like I deserved any good things. And he continued to work on me through that entire pregnancy. I would hear podcast episodes with post abortive women talking about their stories and how God had healed them. And I
Wow.
wasn't searching those out, like, they were just like coming to me somehow. And my pastor at our church would say something that would make me feel like, oh, yes, like I need to do something about this. So after my son was born, I reconnected with a friend. She was a mentor of mine when I was kind of going through all of the yucky stuff that I had gone through. And she had also had an abortion. And so I
Wow.
reconnected with her and I said, "Hey, I I framed it like I wanted to help with her ministry, but she's very wise, and I think she realized, okay, she's needing help." So I just kind of messaged her and said, "Hey, it's been a while, but I just wanted you to know that I see what you post through your ministry, and it's just been a comfort to me all these years. So thank you for what you're doing. And if you ever need any help, I would love to just like volunteer my time and help you." And she messaged me back and told me how much it meant to her and that I would say that. And then she said, it's funny, but we're actually hosting a forgiven and set free post abortion Bible study starting next week. So
No
I don't
way.
know. I know, right? That's God. That's God right there. And she's like, I don't know if you would want to join us, but you're more than welcome. And that I did. I joined, and uh, God placed it on my heart during that study to go and tell my story. That's where we are now.
Yeah, I was about to say, and the rest is history, because it's so beautiful to me hearing your story, because as someone who hasn't walked that road and doesn't have a lot of people in my real world that have walked it, I don't have a lot of understanding about it. And I wouldn't even know where to go to look for resources, to learn like how to help. And it's so incredible that you now have this ministry and a safe place for post abortive women to come and to heal and to be loved, to be reminded like God loves you. You are not too far gone. And just crazy to me that like God opened that door as soon as you were ready to step out. And now here you are. Like, that's so cool. I'm sure for you now, being on this side of healing, you've heard so many women's stories and you've walked
Mhm.
with so many women. For those of us who are listening and maybe we don't know much about this world and we maybe haven't experienced it, are there things that you wish more believers knew or better ways that we could love or understand and support women who are going through an abortion or considering it?
Yeah, so I think that's such a good question. For women in crisis pregnancies, we know that about 70% of women who are abortion minded because they don't feel financially stable enough
Mm,
to care for the child that they are about to have. And so there are many ways that we can help extend love to those women in support. Like, I think of some organizations that will help financially, like Let Them Live. I don't know if you've heard of Let Them Live,
mm,
but they are an organization that for abortion minded women, if that woman would choose life, if finances weren't an issue, they help her take care of that. So if she's like, well, I can't afford rent if and food
mm,
if I'm going to have another baby, they help in a way that is going to help her choose life, but they make sure that their donor dollars aren't going to end up going to an abortion. So they help
mm.
this woman come to a place where she's able to choose life and be able to focus on her baby and not the struggles that she is facing.
Wow.
And many churches, have embrace grace groups. Embrace
Mm.
grace empowers women to choose life. I mean, they throw baby showers for women
Oh, wow.
and just extend love to them. Because I think, too, one of the things I thought about was, what is my mom going to think?
Mm,
And what is my church going to think when I walk in on Sunday and I'm this 17-year-old, unmarried, pregnant teenager?
yeah.
And I don't think we intend to be that way, but sometimes it can come off as a judgment. And
Right.
so just extending that love, instead of saying, oh, I'm sorry, that you're pregnant and you're in this situation, say, congratulations.
Mm,
How can I help? Your baby is a gift because we know that children are a gift from the Lord. It doesn't
mm.
matter the circumstances in which they've been conceived, they are a gift. So I think love really truly is the answer, and loving as Christ loved us with those women.
Wow, that's really beautiful. I love that. And that's something I was going to ask you about as well is you talked about that season where you just hid and you ran from God. And I'm sure there's just a measure of shame. You mentioned the guilt. And I'm sure so many women feel that. I've talked to a few women now who have been through this and have just said, man, that is hard to carry. And so for you, when you started sharing your story, was that scary? And how did you like push through the discomfort of the vulnerability there to start, sharing your own story, but then making space for other women to feel safe to share theirs as well?
Mm, I love that question. It was definitely scary,
Mm,
but I knew that God was calling me to share.
mm,
And I think, we live in a time where if you feel led, it's so important to share your story. I mean, even if it doesn't, I'm not just talking abortion, I mean, your gospel story and sharing that,
yeah.
with the world. But it's, when you hear the word abortion, it tends to be very heated, kind of
Right.
out
Yep.
in the world. And so I was afraid. I was afraid of what my family would think. At that point, my mom was the only person in my family that knew.
Mm.
And her and I didn't really talk about it much. Our relationship was repaired. I mean, she is my best friend, but we didn't talk about it much. Now we do because she also speaks about her experience. But
Oh, wow. That's cool.
the fear of having to tell the rest of my family was definitely hard to overcome because I had heard how they would talk about women who'd had abortions.
Oh,
And
yeah. Wow.
yes, and so I would always think, wow, if only they knew that I was one of them.
Mm,
Thankfully, though, when I did, I was met with so much love and compassion. I remember particularly my stepdad. This experience, I think, has changed, how he responds too, because I had heard him say some very not kind things about women who choose abortion. But when
Mm.
I told him, because he was one of the people that I was most afraid to tell, it was instant, like, hug. I'm so sorry you
Oh.
went through that. I love you. Thank you for telling me. And I think it's really kind of helped him be more compassionate to this issue instead of, kind of so staunch about the terms that he would use prior to now. It's almost for me, I don't know if other people feel this way, but it's almost for me easier to share with strangers than it is with people
Yeah.
that I know personally.
Yeah,
Because
totally get that.
people yeah, people I know personally have this like view of me and then strangers don't. So I can just kind
Yeah.
of share so that's almost been easier than having to share it with my friends and family. But I wanted to make sure I did it with them first so that they didn't have to find out from someone else.
That's so important, and I'm really thankful that you brought that up because, as a lot of pro-life believers are super passionate about this issue, sometimes I feel like it's to the detriment. Like we can have really strong opinions one way or another, and
Mhm.
it can cause a lot of division, it can cause a lot of arguments. But at the end of the day, I think the most important thing that I am learning is that it's not just the choice, it's the whole situation, it's the whole person's story that's led up to that point and everything that they face after. So it's more than just saying, yeah, I'm pro life. It's like, well, what are we doing to love these women in crisis pregnancies who feel like they really don't have a choice? Do we understand where they're coming from? And are we mindful of the way that we are talking about them without really understanding their whole story and experience? Because that's something where, years ago, maybe I wouldn't have given a second thought. I would have thought, like, oh, yeah, this is what's right. This is what the Bible says. And this is, this is the right way. And everyone else, you're wrong. And it's so much more than that. I feel like abortion is just one piece of a bigger puzzle of our broken world. And
Mhm.
so I think it's just really beautiful and healing, I'm sure, to share with women who are scared to open up about your experience and the compassion you received in response. I mean, even that day at the clinic, making eye contact with that priest out there and just having someone meet you with compassion instead of hate and judgment and condemnation, I'm sure has just made such a huge impact on so many women. Are there any other things that you would say to believers, like we should just know about people who are struggling, women who are struggling, or it may be something you would even say to a woman who has had an abortion and is struggling with the shame and the fear?
Yeah, so for other believers, kind of what I just talked about, there is a way to share the truth in a loving way. And so it's not that you necessarily should shy away from talking about what abortion truly is, because it's so important to share that truth, but doing it in a loving way, because 1 in 4 women has had at least one abortion by the age of
Mm.
45. And actually 1 in 6 people in church on any given Sunday have participated in abortion in some way, shape, or form, whether they had one themselves, father of the baby, helped a friend choose that. Maybe they coerced somebody, maybe they worked in an abortion facility. So, sharing that truth is important, but extending compassion while
Mm.
you're doing it so that these people understand that there is healing and that they're not exempt from Christ's forgiveness and the
Yeah.
gift that he gave us. And
Yes.
that's what I would say to any woman listening that's had an abortion. You are not too far gone. You are not exempt from what Christ died for. He died for all sins. And in the Bible, it says if we confess our sins, he is faithful and just to forgive us and cleanse us of all unrighteousness. And it does not say, unless you've had an abortion, or it does
Right.
not say all sins except abortion. So that's what I would say is just it's a process, it's a healing process. Grief is not linear, it affects everyone differently. And it is something that you have permission to grieve in the eyes of God, and He wants you to. And He wants you to lay it before His feet and come to Him.
That's so good, Brittany. Thank you so much for being willing to share your story. It's just so beautiful to see the way that God has redeemed it, the way that God is using your story now to help other women heal and live in freedom and live in that grace. So I love this conversation, and I know there's so much more where it came from. So before we go, you got to tell everybody where they can get connected, listen to your podcast, and learn more.
Oh, yes. So I am on Instagram. You can find me at Brittany Poppe, and I am working on my content on there, but I do like to post food I make in my stories.
We love it.
Yes. But my podcast is called Does God Forgive Abortion? And the whole reason that I have the podcast is to share the truth and love with other women who have chosen abortion and are searching for that redemption in Christ. And so it's really a great tool for women who are struggling with that shame and guilt. But also, if you are someone who's trying to help people that have struggled with that decision, or you have a friend, it's a really great resource to kind of help you understand how to respond and be of help. And then I do have a website. Also, it's brittanypoppe.com. So you can get in touch with me there as well.
Perfect. Well, y'all know I'll make sure everything is linked for you so you can go connect with Brittany. But seriously, Brittany, thank you so much for being here, for sharing your time and your story with us. It's incredible to see how your willingness to stay in it and commit to the process and just say yes to the Lord, and see that He's now built this community through you for women to come and feel safe, for them to have the same healing and freedom is just, it's astounding and so beautiful. So thank you so, so much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on, Hannah. I just am so grateful and so appreciative.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to tune in to another episode of the Byword Show. I love having you here, and your support truly means the world to me. If you enjoyed this episode, would you leave a quick review? It really helps our community grow and reach more women. If you want more, you can shop my books, Waking Up, Living Open, and Love Is on Amazon, and be sure to sign up for my email list so you always get the latest news. I can't wait to chat again soon, but in the meantime, be sure to come hang out with me on social media, and remember, I'm cheering you on.